My name is Annika Earley. I, about a month ago, successfully defended my thesis, and in it I examined phenomenological theories of the body and how it operates and relates to space. I then synthesized those theories into visual media. I also wrote a collection of essays that were modeled after two particular authors, the first one being Victoria Finlay and the second Ellen Malloy. Ellen Malloy is usually characterized as a naturalist writer, and Victoria Finlay writes histories of objects as well as collections of objects. And what they were able to do in their texts is fuse deeply researched subjects in philosophy, anthropology, and history with a very personal narrative. And that was attractive to me because this project started from a very personal question of where I belong, mostly because I was born in Switzerland and raised by a German mother and an American father. And being raised in a tricultural environment is sometimes very confusing. But when I started to sort of research this topic, I became much more interested in the terms I was using rather than my own identity. I started to look at what is the self and what is space over anything else. I also modeled my project around an existential theory that is often used in psychology, that the world operates in three separate modes. The first being Eigenwelt, and that is translated to one's own world. In that realm, I am the decider of all things. I get to decide what everything means to me. In Umwelt, meaning environment, that is the realm of biological fate and determinism. And in this space, I have to acknowledge that I am not, in fact, the decider of all things, and that some things are not up to me at all. And then Mitwelt is the last realm, and it's a bit of a funny one because it is its own sort of space, but it also very much depends on the balance of Eigenwelt and Umwelt. In Mitwelt, it is the fusion of, for instance, my Eigenwelt and your Eigenwelt, or my Umwelt with someone else's. So when I began to unravel this project, I looked at one particular philosopher first. Maurice Merleau-Ponty wrote most of his works in the early 1900s, and he was a Frenchman, very French in everything he did. And he devoted his entire life to the human phenomena, what it meant to be a self in space. So he, in his essay, I and Mind, outlined some initial pieces of what it meant to perceive. The first important thing to keep in mind is that we are all given the same set of tools with which to perceive. We all have eyes that see a very specific field. We can't see behind us without turning our entire bodies, but we can move our eyes without moving our bodies, and we can see our own bodies. We also have hands and arms, which allow us to reach and to pull and to manipulate space and matter. And we also have feet and legs, and those allow us to traverse space. And so we have an understanding of our surroundings. He also proposed that we have nerves, which is factual, not just a proposition. We have nerves in all of these extremities that allow us to not only touch and feel what we are touching, but feel ourselves feeling as well. And so he was an adamant supporter of the dissolving of the line between subject and object, because we behold ourselves beholding. He also proposed that we haunt and are haunted, meaning that the world is prepared for our bodily engagement. We enter spaces and use them because they're sort of prepared and made for our bodies, and that use infuses the spaces with energy that then he called haunting, and by continuing our use of the space, we pass that haunting on to future generations. He also outlined a theory that he called the map of the I can, named after the fact that we are able to traverse space. I understand that I'm here because I know that I'm not over there, thanks to my feet and my nerves. So we understand space because we are able to move. In response to these theories, I developed several pieces. Everything is in pairs, too, because that's just something I did. These are quite pale, these initial pieces, because I followed a theory that Kandinsky, the painter, proposed, that white is a color of potential, And I thought that was very nice to go along with the map of the I can and our tool set of perception. So these first couple pieces are quite pale, and most they're in graphite, and they focus on the perception tool set that we were given. I also created 3 serigraphic monoprints. So they were images created by pushing separate layers through a silkscreen onto paper. And this addressed the map of the I can as well. All of these 3 pieces here are not specific people or places. And I did that on purpose so that the Eigenwelt wouldn't become too active. In our community, when you recognize something, you sort of fill it in with everything you know about that, but I wanted the focus to be the theory rather than one's own Eigenwelt. I also created 2 particular specific pieces made of wax. They're about 30 by 40 inches. I did that by stretching and sort of spider webbing twine across a surface, and then coating that in beeswax that had been treated especially so that it would be it wouldn't dissolve. So then I also looked at Gaston Bachelard and Oscar Miłosz, who were philosophers and authors in the 19th century, and the idea of intimate immensity, which is a very complex concept of sort of a spatial and metaphysical oscillation between vastness and intimacy. Oscar Miłosz describes it very well in one of his books, that he sort of outlined that when you stand at the edge of the ocean and think, oh, I'm so lonely, think about how sad or lonely the ocean feels in the nighttime. And when you look into the heavens, you have to recognize that they look back at you. And I think that's a very tangible concept of intimate immensity, that when you look into the stars, I personally feel both very tiny and very connected. In response to these theories, I created a couple more pieces. This particular piece is one of 3 made in acrylic, colored pencil, and pumice. They're quite small. They're about 5 1/4 inches in diameter. And they address that feeling of looking into the heavens and acknowledging that they look back at you. These pieces are constellations that correspond directly to my birthday, my mother's, and my father's birthdays, because I wanted to bring that personal narrative back into the works without having pictures of myself plastered everywhere. I also created 2 more figure drawings that are a bit more direct in terms of their interpretation. And this is definitely a correspondence with the idea of intimate immensity, and acknowledging that looking back into the universe also means that it's looking back at you. These pieces were in the Blum in week 6. This is week 10. And next I will be continuing this study. In about a week's time, I'll start at the Maine College of Art, and I'll be getting my Master's of Fine Arts in 2 years' time. Thank you.